There is a piece of clothing that crashed a luxury brand's website. Not a limited edition bag, not a couture gown. A t-shirt with 4 words printed across the chest. I told ya. The story behind that shirt goes back further than the film it came from. When Jonathan Anderson was designing the wardrobe for Challengers, Luca Guadagnino's tennis love triangle, he came across an old photograph of JFK Jr., sometime in the 90s, wearing a slogan tee. That slogan traced back to John F. Kennedy's campaign buttons. I told you so. Anderson filed the thought away. When Challengers needed a wardrobe, he brought it back, softened to I told ya, cut in that loose, preppy American athlete way. The kind of thing someone wearing it doesn't think twice about. Zendaya wore it, and then the rest of the world went looking for it at the same moment, hit the Loewe website at the same moment, and brought the servers down. Welcome to Zenith Massif. I'm Lou. You can think of us as a concierge for new perspectives, the stories and adventures hidden in plain sight, and the kind of unrefined taste that doubles as an investment. One garment, a Kennedy campaign button from the early 60s, a photograph from the 90s, a film set in the present, and a Spanish luxury house's global infrastructure overwhelmed. That chain of thinking is what 11 years of Jonathan Anderson at Loewe looked like. Today, we go all the way back. A leather workshop in Madrid was founded in 1846. How it became one of the most talked about luxury brands in the world. A 29-year-old from Northern Ireland who spent 11 years turning a $200 million brand into something approaching 2 billion euros. And the question everyone in the industry is sitting with now, what comes next? Most people who encounter the name Loewe for the first time don't know how to say it. It's Spanish. Loewe. 2 syllables, the stress landing on that second one. Not Loewe, not Loewe. There is something quietly appropriate about that. A name that requires you to stop, think, and get it right. The name comes from a man named Enrique Loewe y Roesberg. He was German, from Hesse, and arrived in Madrid in 1876 to join a leather craftsmen's cooperative that had been founded 30 years earlier, in 1846. To put that in perspective, 1846 was the year the Mexican-American War began. California hadn't yet joined the United States. Karl Marx was beginning to write the Communist Manifesto. Louis Vuitton wouldn't be founded until 1854. Within the entire LVMH family, Loewe is the oldest house. Most people don't know this. When you say LVMH, people think LV, Dior, Givenchy. Loewe tends to come in somewhere after that, but in terms of history, it was there first. After Enrique joined, the cooperative restructured under his name. What he brought was a German craftsman's obsession with material precision, and what Spain already had was centuries of leather tradition. The two met and produced something distinctive. The house grew quickly. By the early 20th century, the Spanish royal family took notice. In 1905, King Alfonso XIII personally granted Loewe a royal warrant, designating it the official supplier to the Spanish crown. From that point, the clientele list began to fill with names. Ernest Hemingway, Ava Gardner, Rita Hayworth, Marlene Dietrich, Sophia Loren. This wasn't marketing. These were the people of that era, simply choosing what they wanted to wear and carry. One thing worth pausing on before we move forward, the logo. The Loewe logo is 4 letter L's overlapping each other, forming a shape that reads almost like a rune or an abstract seal. At first glance, you might not even identify it as 4 L's. The decision behind that design is essentially a philosophy. It's waiting to be discovered. You find it on buttons, on gold-stamped interior tags, on zipper pulls. It's present, but only for those who go looking. In an industry that often equates visibility with value, that is a deliberate and rather confident choice. LVMH acquired Loewe in 1996. Over the following 2 decades, the house went through several creative directors: Narciso Rodriguez, Jose Enrique Oña Selfa, Stuart Vevers. Each left their mark, but during this period, Loewe was contracting, focusing, repositioning itself as a specialist in high-end leather goods. Under Stuart Vevers, the ready-to-wear line was significantly reduced. The strategy was conservative. The market performance was steady, and the brand's presence in fashion conversation became quieter and quieter. In 2013, Vevers left for Coach. LVMH needed to find the next creative director for Loewe. They found a 29-year-old from Northern Ireland named Jonathan Anderson. The puzzle bag was born around this transition. Anderson took over in 2013. The puzzle was formally launched around 2015, and this year, 2025, marks its 10th anniversary. The bag is one of Loewe's modern myths: geometric cutting, deceptively complex to look at, surprisingly light to carry. The leather folds into 3 dimensions. The silhouette shifts depending on the angle. Its intelligence lies in what it manages to be simultaneously: a feat of craft, a visual puzzle, and something you could genuinely use every day. It moved Loewe from that old Spanish leather house to the brand with the geometric bag. In an industry where you need a signature object to be remembered, that is simply the cost of entry. Now let's go back and meet the 29-year-old, Jonathan William Anderson, born September 17, 1984, in Magherafelt, Northern Ireland. His father, Willie Anderson, played international rugby for Ireland between 1984 and 1990. His mother, Heather, taught English in secondary school. He has a brother, Thomas, who also played professional rugby. His maternal grandfather was a textile designer. There is a tension in that family portrait that's worth sitting with. A father whose work was entirely physical and spatial. A grandfather whose work was entirely about material and pattern. Anderson grew up between 2 completely different sensory languages. Northern Ireland in the 90s was still living through the Troubles. 30 years of political violence, sectarian division, the ambient tension of a society in conflict. That was the backdrop. But every summer, Anderson's family went to Ibiza, where his parents owned a house. The severity and grayness of Northern Ireland on one side, the color and freedom of Ibiza on the other. Anderson has said that these 2 extremes, experienced simultaneously as a child, became the deepest layer of his sensibility as a designer. The instinct to find beauty inside contradiction may have started there. He went to London, studied menswear at the London College of Fashion, then spent a period in Seattle studying acting, which sounds like a detour until you hear what he took from it. That clothing is the language of character, that what someone wears is how an identity is communicated. He started thinking about clothes the way a director thinks about a performance. In 2008, at 24, he founded J.W. Anderson in London. Initially menswear, then quickly expanded to combine presentations where gender categories were deliberately dissolved. Men in skirts, women in structured, wide-shouldered tailoring, everyone on the same runway. The industry found it unsettling and then found it compelling. In 2013, LVMH came to him. 2 people, specifically, Pierre-Yves Roussel, who was then chairman and CEO of LVMH's fashion division, and Delphine Arnault, Bernard Arnault's daughter and a senior figure at the group. They met Anderson, saw his proposal for Loewe, and, in Roussel's words, felt immediately that they could help him realize the full potential of what he was building. LVMH took a minority stake in J.W. Anderson. CEO Lisa Montague made the appointment official. 2 brands running simultaneously. 11 years. The first thing Anderson did when he arrived was go into the archive. He spent a long time in the storeroom, looking at objects from the Enrique era, reading old documents, studying the advertisements. He was looking for the DNA, what this house had actually believed in, across its history. What he found at the center of it was leather, an almost scientific obsession with animal material. From lambskin to calfskin to suede, the Loewe craftsman had developed knowledge about tanning, dyeing, and cutting that couldn't be written down. It had accumulated in hands over nearly 2 centuries. That's the context for the first Loewe piece I bought, an aviator jacket in shearling. The outer shell is an olive green leather, substantial, with a slight oil in the finish, the kind of weight that tells you something before you even put it on. The collar is off-white shearling, thick enough that it reads almost like a cloud that's been attached to the neckline. Then there are the sleeve tabs at the cuffs, small leather straps in a darker brown, the kind of detail that does nothing functional but changes the personality of the whole garment. Multiple layers of material, the smooth outer leather, the interlining, the shearling interior. But when you wear it, the weight distributes evenly. The relationship with shearling goes back to the earliest days of the house, before anyone had coined the word luxury, when it was simply Madrid craftsmen working the best available material with as much care as they knew how to give it. Anderson didn't break that tradition. He made it contemporary without diluting its density. In 2016, Anderson established the Loewe Foundation Craft Prize. Every year, craftspeople from around the world submit work. 30 pieces are shortlisted. One wins. The judging panel is not decorative. The director of decorative arts at the Louvre, the director of the Victoria and Albert Museum, Pritzker Prize architects, and curators from the Metropolitan. The prize is €50,000, but the more significant thing is what the prize asserts, that craft is art and deserves to be evaluated by the most rigorous standards available. Let me tell you about a few of the winners, because the work is worth describing. 2023, Eriko Inazaki, a Japanese artist, for a piece called Metanoia, a ceramic sculpture covered entirely in thousands of tiny ceramic microforms, each individually made and applied. The surface reads somewhere between crystalline growth and something organic, cellular. The judges said they had never encountered a decorative language quite like it within ceramics. Standing in front of it, you go quiet, because you understand that someone spent an enormous amount of time making an enormous number of small decisions, and every one of them was right. 2024, Andres Anza, from Mexico, For I Only Know What I Have Seen, a life-size ceramic sculpture assembled in 5 sections from refractory clay, the overall form somewhere between plant and animal, twisted and folded and caving inward. Thousands of spike-like protrusions cover the surface. After firing, the entire piece was painted a single color, so that depth and shadow come entirely from the texture those spikes create. It was exhibited at the Palais de Tokyo in Paris. I've looked at photographs of it many times. I know the photographs can't account for what the surface actually feels like. 2025, Kunimasa Aoki, a Japanese sculptor, for Realm of Living Things 19. Terracotta, built using the coil method, clay layered and compressed and layered again until the density becomes something you can feel just by looking at it. He describes his practice as 50% tradition, 50% invention. The judges said the way he uses the coil technique is among the most persuasive things they've seen in contemporary craft. The exhibition was held at the Thyssen-Bornemisza Museum in Madrid. 2 special mentions from 2025 worth naming. Nifemi Marcus Bello, a Nigerian-born designer, for TM bench with bowl, cast, welded, and polished from recycled automotive aluminum, asking what happens when a material's industrial history becomes part of the object's meaning. And Studio Sumakshi Singh, for Monument, a full-scale reproduction of a 12th century colonnade from Delhi, rendered entirely in copper zari thread. The question underneath it, how does a cultural trace survive the decay of the thing that carried it? Every year, these pieces answer the same question. What can a pair of hands produce, given enough time and a deep enough understanding of material? Anderson built this prize because he does not believe there was ever a meaningful boundary between craftsperson and artist. That boundary was constructed by a particular moment in art history. It has nothing to do with the act of making. The craft prize erodes it, year by year. So sometimes I walk into the store and I buy nothing. I just see what's in the corner. That habit, to be curious without an agenda, may be the best thing this brand gave me during the Anderson years. A few of the things Anderson did are worth remembering. The Studio Ghibli collaborations. 3 consecutive years beginning in 2021. My Neighbor Totoro, Spirited Away, Howl's Moving Castle. At the time, this was the most surprising collaboration the fashion industry had seen from a luxury house, because it made no conventional sense. Miyazaki's hand-drawn animation and Spanish leather craft. What do these things have to do with each other? The answer is respect for imagination. Miyazaki's worldview and Anderson's worldview at Loewe were saying the same thing, that there is a logic operating outside everyday reality, and that logic is just as real, just as worthy of serious attention. The collection sold out globally. Secondary market premiums were significant. There is a pair of boots from one of Anderson's collections that I find hard to shake. Rubber, molded into the shape of a frog. Extravagant, strange. And yet the moment you see someone wearing them, there is a feeling, hard to name, something between delight and recognition, that seems completely right. The ability to place absurdity and genuine pleasure in the same object is one of Anderson's signatures. In 2024, Anderson collaborated with On, the Swiss performance brand, on a technical outerwear line and the cloud tilt trainer. Craft and performance in the same garment, neither side compromising. It works because both parties understand what they're actually good at. The pattern across all of these, when you step back, Anderson was looking for combinations that seem wrong and then feel exactly right. Miyazaki and leather, frog and luxury, cinema and fashion, sport and craft. That instinct, knowing what belongs together before anyone else can see it, is not something you can train into a process. Another piece from my wardrobe that's quite fun, the denim puffer shirt. The name sounds unremarkable. What it actually is, a shirt cut, collar, chest pocket, button placket, filled with down, in a deep indigo denim that sits closer to ink than to the blue most people associate with the fabric. The silhouette stays true to the shirt pattern despite the fill. It doesn't balloon. It holds its shape. What this garment is doing is running two registers at once. The directness of workwear, denim, pockets, buttons, and the precision of something made at a very high level. The distribution of the fill, the spacing of the quilting, the way the collar sits. Anderson has talked about denim in interviews as an honest fabric. It records use. It changes over time. It doesn't pretend to be anything other than what it is. That relationship to material truth is exactly what Loewe has maintained with leather across 180 years. Same principle, different clothes. Denim is uncomfortable territory for most luxury houses. Too everyday, too democratic. Anderson brought it into the brand anyway. Any material, treated with complete seriousness, becomes a position. In 2013, when Anderson arrived, the brand was generating approximately $200 million a year, one of the smallest houses in the LVMH portfolio. Low profile by almost any measure. By 2024, Anderson's last full year, the brand's reported revenue had reached €885 million, up 9.17% year-on-year. Including business attributed through associated entities, market estimates put the total scale approaching €2 billion. Revenue had grown more than 7 times over. What was underneath that? Cultural capital, primarily. The brand reached number 1 on the list index, the global ranking compiled from search volume, media coverage, social discussion, and purchase data, for 2 consecutive years. Gucci, Prada, and Dior were not in that position. In 2024, Time magazine placed Anderson on its list of the 100 most influential people in the world. But the ledger has another side. In 2024, the brand net profit fell 24.26%, from €207 million the year before to €157 million. Revenue expanding while margins compress. This is the pressure the entire luxury sector was navigating in 2024. Cultural heat and financial performance are related but not the same thing. What Anderson built in terms of the brand's position, its meaning, its desirability, its conversation, is the largest asset the next creative director inherits. It is also the largest pressure. The last piece, a jacquard hooded shirt in wool and cotton, blue and white narrow stripes, fine enough that the fabric reads at first like something from a very considered traditional menswear collection. The cut is wider than a shirt, with more weight. And then there is the hood, not constructed as a hood in the conventional sense, but made from a single thick white cotton cord, folded and threaded through 2 eyelets at the collar, the 2 ends hanging down across the chest. That cord changes the entire character of the garment. Without it, a very refined striped knit. With it, something that sits between athletic and considered, between casual and deliberate, something that makes a person look twice. Anderson has spoken about a question he returns to in his design process. What detail would make someone, opening their wardrobe in the morning and choosing this thing, feel slightly better about the day? It's a small question. It turns out to be a demanding one. The jacquard means the stripe is woven into the fabric, not printed onto it. There is a subtle relief in the surface. You feel it with your fingers before you fully register it with your eyes. In different light, the stripe deepens or lightens slightly. This is the quietest kind of luxury, something you discover gradually, something that reveals itself to attention rather than announcing itself to the room. The craft is in the noticing. On March 17, 2025, Jonathan Anderson announced on Instagram that he was leaving The brand, he wrote, "From the very first day, I found kindred spirits. Thank you for sharing your craft with me. Over the past 11 years, I have been fortunate to be surrounded by a team of imaginative, skilled, resilient, and creative people who found ways to say yes to all my wildest ideas." He didn't say in that post where he was going, but the industry already knew. Dior, also an LVMH house, Kim Jones had stepped back from Dior Men's not long before. This looked from the outside like a large-scale internal realignment within the group. Anderson, who had now spent 11 years building one of the most admired track records in the industry, was moving to one of the most significant roles fashion has to offer. In May 2025, the appointment was confirmed. Creative Director of Women's, Men's, and Haute Couture at Dior, only the second person, after Christian Dior himself, to hold all three simultaneously. He will be the second person, after Christian Dior himself, to hold responsibility for all three simultaneously. While the ink was drying on that chapter, the next one at the brand had already begun. On March 24th, 2025, 1 week after Anderson's announcement, the brand named its new creative directors, Jack McCullough and Lazaro Hernandez, effective April 7th, 2025. For anyone not immediately familiar, they are the founders of Proenza Schouler. The brand name itself is a small piece of their story. Proenza is Lazaro Hernandez's mother's maiden name. Schouler is Jack McCullough's mother's. That choice of name tells you something about the temperature of how they work. They are also, it should be said, life partners, in the way that the Chanel Lagerfeld and Dior Saint Laurent generations tended not to announce. They met at Parsons School of Design in New York. Their graduate collection, completed while they were still students, was bought in its entirety by Barney's New York. That almost never happens. That was 2002. Proenza Schouler became a real brand from a student project and sustained itself for over 2 decades in New York. The industry describes their aesthetic as anti-minimal modernism, precise tailoring with unexpected detail, geometric cutting, transparent layering, a sensibility toward women's wear that is simultaneously rigorous and playful. Their PS1 bag, launched in 2008, became one of that decade's defining objects in New York fashion. 5 CFDA awards, including 3 for Women's Wear Designer of the Year. The women who wear Proenza Schouler: Beyoncé, Julianne Moore, Emily Ratajkowski. A short list that tells you something about who they're speaking to. Women who know what they want and choose with intention. In January 2025, McCullough and Hernandez announced their departure from Proenza Schouler. Conversations with LVMH, it now appears, had been ongoing for years. 3 months after they left, the brand appointment was confirmed. Why them? They have demonstrated the ability to create an icon product, the PS1 bag. The brand needs a new one. The puzzle bag belongs to the Anderson era. Their investment in concept and craft aligns with the house's DNA. And 2 voices in dialogue, rather than a single creative vision, may be exactly what a brand at this particular inflection point needs. But this is genuinely open. Anderson's cultural capital was accumulated slowly, over a decade, through an enormous number of specific decisions. McCullough and Hernandez are Americans arriving in Paris as newcomers to this particular stage. What they do with the brand, that is the question the whole industry is waiting on. There is a particular thing that tends to get lost when the scale of what you're doing grows. Call it the childlike version of seriousness, the quality of being completely absorbed in a thing for its own sake, curious without agenda, willing to follow an idea to wherever it actually leads. That quality is usually the first casualty of responsibility. The decisions get bigger. The safety of the proven becomes more appealing. The impulse that asks, what if we made the boots look like frogs, starts to feel like a risk you can't afford. Anderson's Loewe was a reminder that this curious impulse is worth protecting. From a leather craftsmen's cooperative in Madrid in 1846 to a house approaching 2 billion euros a year, across 170-something years, there are many more stories than one episode can hold. A 29-year-old from Northern Ireland, handed an ancient brand, choosing to take it somewhere no one expected, finding the audience that was waiting for exactly that. Now, 2 Americans are arriving from New York to take the next chapter somewhere new. That story is still being written. Go have a look at the Craft Prize winners. The work is genuinely worth your time. Leave us a note and let us know what you found. And if you'd like to go deeper, we're on Substack. Next episode, we're going to Barcelona for some sunshine. Until then,